Good evening, everybody. Everything new under the sun. I've been super busy. Yesterday, I worked like a 14-hour day or something like that. I think that's why a lot of YouTubers are single. If you notice, a lot of YouTubers are single, or they don't have kids, or maybe it's their full-time job or something. I don't know, but um, I just some days I don't have time and I'm wiped out. But the news continues. There's lots of guys out there as well that are still doing the regular videos. Ken Johnson is one. Now, I gave him the shout out again on the community page, and he was doing a live stream. I think he does a live stream every Thursday or something like that. And he was talking about the 10 weeks of Enoch. So interesting there. Again, extra biblical stuff. But he and a co-person there were discussing, the implications. Could it be true for today, and what does it predict? What does it talk about? And one of the things that we've been talking about, of course, is the 70 shepherds of Israel. Now, that comes out of the book of Enoch, the first book of Enoch. And it's a prophecy of Enoch that predicts that there's going to be 70 shepherds of Israel. And there's going to be, of those 70, there's going to be 12 final prime ministers, and then apparently the Messiah. This is in, let's see, Enoch's prophecy of the 70 shepherds of Israel. Now, I believe this is Ken Johnson's book of it. There is another prophecy that, although it does not give the exact year date, it indicates that we are on the threshold of the tribulation. This prophecy also speaks of the fiery abyss that the wicked will be cast into. The prophecy isn't in the Bible, however. It's instead found in the book of 1 Enoch, in Enoch's prophecy of the 70 shepherds of Israel. Based on archaeological evidence, even the most conservative scholars agree that a manuscript this prophecy appears in predates the New Testament by at least several hundred years. However, the book of 1 Enoch and prophecy of the 70 shepherds may predate most of the Old Testament by 1,000 years or more. So, interesting history on it. So again, it speaks of some leaders of Israel. First Enoch 89 says, "And he called 70 shepherds and cast those sheep to them that they might pasture them." So 70 shepherds. "And he spoke to the shepherds and their companions, Let each individual of you pasture the sheep henceforward, and everything that I shall command you, that do ye. And I will deliver them over unto you, duly numbered, and tell you which of them are to be destroyed, and them destroy ye. And he gave over unto them those sheep." First Enoch 89. It says, "These 70 symbolic shepherds watch over the flock of sheep that figuratively are God's chosen people." The next passage tells us that Enoch saw the first group of 35 shepherds as unique from the other shepherds. So it goes on, and I'll flip to the end here. "The 12 last shepherds of Israel will therefore be judged and found guilty with 58 shepherd kings of Israel who came before them, with the exception perhaps of King David and King Josiah, which were, good kings. Most from among those 70 kings, however, will perish without repenting of their sins." One easy way to test the legitimacy of Enoch's prophetic vision of the 70 shepherds of Israel is to see how closely the prophecy of the 12 shepherds applies today. We can do this by counting how many prime ministers have ruled in the modern nation called Israel since its inception in 1948. Uncannily, 12 men have served in office so far. These are the last 12. As shown in the following list, it says. And so it goes, and it shows you these various 12 people, starting with David Ben-Gurion, and ending up with Netanyahu. And Netanyahu's done several terms. It's either 4 or 5. And I think this was going to be his 5th term. But he has led consecutively the last number of terms in a miraculous sort of way. But again, so this predicts basically that the Messiah will come after the 12. So it says here, look at the bottom. During the 12th shepherd of Israel's rule, Enoch prophesied that the persecuted sheep that follow the one-horned ram will be given a great sword with which to fight their enemies. Could that be maybe a nuclear weapon? As shown when this prophecy is focused on again in the next chapter, the sword is the Holy Spirit. After this, the Lord of the sheep will smite the earth with his wrath. destroy the wicked, set up his own kingdom, and rule until the last judgment. Therefore, the 12th prime minister of Israel is likely to be the last one to rule before the second coming of Christ. So that is interesting detail about that. The 12th prime minister of Israel is likely to be the last one to rule before the second coming. If this is true, it means Yeshua himself will serve as the 13th leader of modern Israel during his millennial reign. This fact again shows that the 13th member of any group can often turn evil into good. So again, it goes on and basically suggests that Netanyahu is, in fact, the 12th and final prime minister before the Messiah. Now he is coincidentally, miraculously, however you want to term it, he has continued to stay the leader for the last, 12 years or something like that. And he had a term prior to that as well. So some fascinating details about Enoch. And again, so we're looking at, will this be debunked? Will this be confirmed, proven? Have we understood it correctly? Is Netanyahu the 12th, or are the numbers wrong or something? And so that's kind of the big question. So as we look at what's happening in the world, we have, let's see, this is JPost. Let me go to JPost here. So Bennett Lapid government to be sworn in Sunday. So this is the latest news, June 8th, 2021. So Sunday, this is when they're going to be sworn in if the Knesset agrees to it. And Netanyahu is apparently going to head to opposition. The new unity government led by Naftali Bennett and Yair Lapid will be brought to a vote of confidence and sworn in during a special session of the Knesset on Sunday. And so let's take a look. Let me just pull up this jpost.com. Let's go to jpost.com, and you can see, if we go to elections, you can see that, and this will play into the next part I want to talk about. Likud, and that's Netanyahu's party, won 30 seats. So he is well and by far the leading one there, leading group. Blue and white, is Benny Gantz's group. So Likud led there. Netanyahu led by far the most. But Bennett and his unity government, made up of several parties, including the one of the Arab parties, is apparently going to rule. Now, if that happens, as we understand it today, that would effectively debunk the 70 shepherds of Israel. So let's take a look at this article. This is from jns.org. So it says, let me scroll down there. There we go. If a government is formed, God forbid, we will topple it very quickly. Israel's emerging coalition is the biggest election deceit in Israeli history. Now, you look at election deceit, elections being stolen. What do you think of? Well, you immediately think of Trump, right? And this article has some interesting parallels. And there's been several people who suggest that, what happens in the U.S. happens in Israel, and what happens in Israel happens in the U.S. There's a mirroring there. There's a paralleling there politically. And it's interesting. So, of course, we had Trump saying the elections were stolen, and there was decent evidence that there was some of that happening. Now, Netanyahu is coming out and saying, maybe the election's stolen. Maybe there's some deceit there. Interesting. It says, let's see. The head of Israeli security agency Shin Bet issued a warning Saturday against a rising incitement in Israel, especially on social media, it says, with the Knesset preparing to announce this week the successful formation of a government by Yesh Atid leader Yair Lapid, as Shin Bet has been tracking an increase in violent and inciting discourse. Does that sound like what happened during the elections? Incitement to violence? That's what the left was saying, right? The extremist rhetoric, mainly online, targeting lawmakers looking to end the 12-year reign of Netanyahu, could be interpreted as permitting violent and illegal activity. Are they going to clamp down on social media? Absolutely. Interesting. That's what they did in the U.S., right? They clamped down on social media. He called on elected officials, religious leaders, educators, and opinion leaders from all corners of the political spectrum to help reduce the level of extremist rhetoric. So clamp down on free speech is basically what they're saying. So again, think of the parallel between Trump and what happened there over the last 6 months, 8 months, and what's happening to Netanyahu now. A guy that is very popular. He's obviously very popular. When you look at the numbers here, the Likud party, 30, well above. The next closest was Yesh Atid at 17, and very popular, just like Trump was. But it's going the other way. It says, Israel Defense Minister Gantz tweeted Saturday in support of Argaman. We do not seem to have learned the necessary lessons from past events. Anyone who tries to deny the legitimacy of basic democratic moves and ignites a fire of incitement also bears a responsibility. Does that terminology, does that language sound like what happened in the United States? Are you saying something against the legitimacy of the democratic process? You can't say that, right? I just think this is a fascinating article and how it parallels the social media and the attack on free speech. And if you even question the elections, you are inciting hatred and whatever else. Let's see. Argaman's announcement comes in the wake of protests against Yamina leader Naftali Bennett and members of his party who are accused by their former supporters of having betrayed their campaign promises never to form a government with opposition Lapid. So we have lots of deceit and lying in the governments. Of course, we see that a lot. But again, I just think it's interesting that so the United States political system goes, so apparently Israel goes as well. And, they're talking about inciting violence. They're talking about locking down social media. They're talking about lies and deceit in the election. And they're talking about saying, if you don't agree with the elections, well, you're part of the problem because this is the democratic process and it worked. It's fascinating. And, obviously, the most popular party and therefore a leader by far over Yesh Atid, and yet he's being knocked out because he couldn't come up with his own coalition of these various groups. I think that is a pretty fascinating thing when you look at that and compare that to the U.S. Political situation. Now, the person I posted, Star Academy? Oh, I've forgotten the name of the guy, but he did a live stream today, and a part 2 of what gold will look like in the Depression. He's the guy who speaks from firsthand experience about hyperinflation occurring in Romania, and very interesting. So go check him out. Let me just see if I can pull him up real quick. Sorry for making the screen go blank there. I just want to pull up the community tab here. And, okay, pull up the community tab. Yeah, so here's Ken Johnson. Of course, he did that live stream with Josh Peck is the name. And they were talking about the 10 weeks prophecy in Enoch. So I put the link there. You can see the link there. Definitely check out the link. You can't see my mouse, but that's an interesting one. And check out Ken Johnson. He live streams regularly. And yeah, there you go. Check him out. But here's the other guy, Star Path Academy. So like I said, he did a second video and in fact a live stream today about this gold and silver. 46 minutes. Gold and silver during hyperinflation. My experience in Romania, part 2. So go listen to this. Again, I have no idea if this guy is Christian or not, but I'm kind of out here as a watchman on the wall, and I'm providing information to you to say, hey, think about this, or go check out this. And this is certainly interesting as it relates to hyperinflation and what that looks like, how that plays out in the world. Now, we have all sorts of signs that things are happening, too. Look at this. 5 signs that America's raging inflation crisis is accelerating. This is the economiccollapseblog.com. News, again, is increasing that there's trouble in the economy. Number 1, inflation tends to hit those at the bottom of the economic food chain and the hardest. But at this point, even most millionaires say they are concerned about inflation. What does Star Path Academy say in Romania? It hit the poorest people the hardest. They're always hit the hardest. They have no backup. They have no hard assets. They have no wealth built up that they can draw on or rely upon during times of trouble. So they are hit the hardest. So who's that? We call ourselves the middle class in this day and age, but really we're not middle class. We're lower class. The middle class are actually the higher class people who actually don't work or have super high paying jobs. Those are the middle class. We are definitely the lower class. If you look at the class structures and the class delineations, if you were to take our society, move it back 150 years, you and I would likely be in the lower class, the working class, as they say, people who had to work every day, 8 hours a day, for their livelihood. And certainly that's what I do, and I think that's what most of you do as well. If you're rich, that's great. Maybe you are middle class or upper class, but most of us, against those, when you compare it against those, are lower class. And most of them have to be. We can't, there's no way a society could run if all of us were middle class. There has to be lower class people who are willing to do the grunt work, put blood, sweat, and tears and elbow grease into things, work on cars, mechanics, for example. There has to be those people, the working class, and that's who you and I are. We will get hit hardest. Number 2, the biggest banks in the world are now sounding the alarm. Deutsche Bank is concerned about inflation. This week, a team of analysts from Deutsche Bank warned that neglecting inflation leaves global economies sitting on a time bomb. Gregory Mannarino spoke of this, and he was surprised and amazed that Deutsche Bank came out and called this out and said there's something wrong. The most basic laws of economics is the ones that have stood the test of time over a millennium have not been suspended. An explosive growth in debt financed largely by central banks is likely to lead to higher inflation. That's going to hit all of us once they start increasing interest rates, which they can't. That would bankrupt everybody. They're going to say, you know what? We need to go to negative rates. And that's part of my process towards the mark of the beast, where not only do interest rates not go up, but in fact they start going negative, and that's their solution to dealing with all the debt. That's how they make it easier for you and I. Even though every dollar is worth less, they make it easier by you and I by paying us to borrow money. Literally, you'll go to the bank and they will pay you to take money out of the bank and to spend it on something because they'll want you to spend money so badly. Number 3, and this is a big deal around where I am. Housing prices are crazy. Housing prices continue to soar into the stratosphere in the United States. These days, investment funds, wealthy individuals, and foreigners are all gobbling up homes in anticipation of making huge profits. I'll say where I am, the price of our house is more than doubled over the last year. More than doubled for sure. Maybe even near 3 times. And so there are people who, are flipping houses right now, or are selling them. And they're banking all that extra money. And if you're smart, if you have the resources, you can do that. Not all of us can, but that's happening. Number 4, used car prices have now officially entered absurd territory. This week we learned that the used vehicle value index has shot up 26%. So the price of everything is rising. That means the value of every single dollar is decreasing. Number 5, this hits us all. Food prices continue to surge higher, and I continue to see supports of intermittent shortages around the nation. Again, you look at the price of lumber. It goes on, and let's see. Down in Florida, Papa B's owner says only a limited number of cases of chicken wings are being made available to restaurants in her area, and she also says the price for such cases has nearly doubled. So everything is going to increase a huge amount. So trouble is coming, I thought there were 6. I guess it is only 5 signs. But yeah, a lot of people are seeing this, and this word inflation, this is being spoken of by many, many people. The big banks are saying it. Usually they don't say it because they don't want to spook everybody, but now they're saying it. Even the Federal Reserve presidents, they're coming out and saying it. Janet Yellen is coming out and saying the word inflation. Right now she's saying it's not a problem. But she's saying the word. She's acknowledging that something is happening and it's increasing. This could run away to hyperinflation. So I encourage you to go check out Star Path Academy and his real world experience about what it looks like to be in a hyperinflated economy and the price of everything going up, and who it gets hit the worst. You and I, the people at the bottom of the rung, working hard for our money, the working poor, if you will, and just getting by. So incredible things, guys. The Lord's return is near. We'll see come Sunday if indeed the Bennett Lapid government is sworn in by the Knesset. And if that's the case, you'd have to say that it looks like the 70 Shepherds of Israel has been debunked at that point. Now there could be another interpretation of it. I don't know. I haven't heard it. Ken Johnson would probably be the guy to talk about it, and I haven't heard. I'll have to check out his channel and see if he's talking about it. But I don't know of another interpretation of it. So it's going to be very interesting. Miraculously, in a sort of way, he has held power. Netanyahu has over the last 12 years, time and time again. When you thought he wasn't going to win, he won again. So very interesting to see what happens. And this, I don't know. Maybe there won't be any government. Maybe there'll be a stalemate in the Knesset. But suffice it to say, time is running short, I think. The end of time is very near, and the 7-year period could very well start the end of this year, sometime, fall period. As Ken Johnson and Josh Peck were talking about the prophecy of the 10 weeks in Enoch, they're saying the year 2025 is an interesting turning point. There's a turning point there, according to that prophecy. And of course, that's right on. That would be pretty much the middle of the tribulation period, according to my understanding of the timeline of the return of the Lord. So when you take that into account and all the other prophecies happening, it's incredible. One last article. Rabbi predicts Messiah appearing soon. Now, I follow these things. It's interesting to hear what these rabbis say. They're not always on, or they're several years off, or maybe they're just not right at all. But it's interesting that over the last 6 years, there have been many rabbis come out and say these things. An Israeli news outlet is reporting in Hebrew on a rabbinic prediction from over 200 years ago regarding dwindling food supply that was predicted to occur now in our time, and how it heralds the Messianic kingdom in Israel. The COVID global lockdowns disrupted large sections of many economies and caused a degree of global food crisis. I think the next degree of it will be the inflation, where there will be supplies, but you can't afford the supplies. You can't afford the loaf of bread. And what does the Bible say about a loaf of bread or a meal? It's going to cost a day's wages to get enough flour to make a loaf of bread for the day, for your meal. It's going to cost a day's wages just to eat. You won't have any money to save or put gas in your car. You're going to make just enough to eat food. That's all you'll have. And again, you're talking about Star Path Academy's experience from Romania. That's what he had talked about. And it's very, very hard times for some people. Long before Rabbi Zalman's prediction, the New Testament contained apocalyptic prophecies which include famine, the third horseman of the apocalypse in Revelation 6. I speak about that a lot. Held a scale for weighing barley and heralded soaring grain prices, the equivalent of a quart-liter bag of flour for over $100. So again, your day's wages to buy enough flour to eat for that day. It says famines have occurred for thousands of years. For example, right here in Israel, during the lifetimes of Isaac and Joseph, or the Irish potato famine of the mid-1800s. So when you think about a famine, and that it couldn't happen now, well, none of us thought COVID could happen. None of us thought a pandemic could happen. Famines have happened throughout the last 6,000 years, the history of man, and they're going to happen again. We just can't believe it, that it's going to happen. We think the government's going to always be able to provide for us somehow, or that food will always be available, and that's kidding ourselves. We've been living fat, dumb, and happy really for, since World War II, and nothing major has happened to us in North America, and so we are primed and ready and vulnerable for massive trouble on the food side of things. China is buying up grain. China apparently buying up the world grain supplies to feed its people. In Israel, they can actually provide all their own food, which is incredible, because they will be preserved through the 7-year period. So it makes sense that they would be creating all their own food when all the countries of the earth, all the people who hate Israel and surround Israel, all the armies of the earth surround Israel, they're still able to eat because they're producing all their own food. So pretty fascinating there. That's even prophecy. It says, even when COVID restrictions closed Israeli skies to fresh food imports, we saw no appreciable change in our grocery shelves. That to me is Bible prophecy. That's the setup for the 7-year period where Israel is sheltered through that period and sustained through that period when all the world around them comes against them and hates them. Of course, wouldn't be doing business with them because they hate them. BDS, boycott, divest, and sanction. Yet God provides, and the nation of Israel is providing all their own food. So they didn't feel any effects from COVID. So fascinating stuff, guys. All right, I'm gonna leave it there for today. Thanks for watching. If you want to buy me a coffee, you can send me a tip to buy me a coffee there if you'd like, and that would be much appreciated. And as always, we'll see you guys in the next video.